Feel Good Talk, where our focus is on mind, body, soul, and business. You are now tuning into Let's Talk About It with Izzy Meditates and Kendra Moore.
Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. Today is what Mr. JD Slade and Culpepper calls Little Friday. So this is Little Friday. Little Friday.
I'll take it. I was going to say it's my second, it's my second date, my first or second favorite day.
Yes, because it's closer to the weekend.
Heck yeah.
Well, hello, everyone out there in Feel Good Talk Land. We have a special guest today. Her name is Jen Kidwell, and she is a will and trust attorney, also the CEO of Legacy Law LLC. Welcome.
Thank Jen. You. So happy to have you.
Yes, I've been waiting for this all week. I'm so excited. So how's your week going? How's everybody doing?
It's good, man. It's cold up here. We are in that like snow belt. And so it has been a week of snowballs and late openings and just like praying that we can like send them back where they should be in the schools.
You're like, I will put them on the sled myself and pull them to
exactly. Yes. Yeah. It's funny because you start out the first couple days and you're like, this is so much fun. And then by day 3 and 4, you're like, okay, I have nothing else planned. I don't know what to do.
You realize you're trapped.
Yeah. We got crushed with snow. We were lucky this time. Our power did not go out, but I do have friends who their power just came on today. So it's been 4 to 5 days for them. Yeah, it's really, we've had it once where it's 4 to 5 days. So you have to have a backup generator or have a friend that you could go to their house in the wintertime, because once the power goes out, it is out. Yeah. So
that's crazy.
That's been about it this week. That's been the talk of the town. It's just snow and trying to get through it. Yeah.
Well, I have sunshine and 75 degrees today.
Yes.
So
yes.
I can't relate.
She teases me. She's like, Isabel, why do you have on a sweater? I live in Central Virginia. It's cold here.
Yes. So I haven't had snow in so long. I mean, even in Delaware, the snow numbers have just fallen so low, every winter. We actually got to the point where we wanted snow, especially around, the holidays. So I will say it was a bit, David and I were both like, we would want it. We do miss the cold around the holidays. And then we got like a little cold snap where it was like the low went to like the 30s, 40s, and then midday it was like 60s. And like a little breeze. And then we were like, oh man, this is so nice. And this was probably like 3 days before Christmas. And then Christmas came, it was like 77 degrees, sunny. We were like, what? But
I'm so jealous.
Not really.
So tell us about your week. I know you have news. I know you have good news.
Yes, I closed on my house yesterday.
Yay.
Woohoo! So excited. And and the moving company, they're coming tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I'll have tomorrow and the weekend. But, I was talking with someone today and I'm like, man, this is just so reminiscent of life, because it's like you work to get to a certain point and you're like, woo, okay, got the, move to Florida. Woo, okay. Now was looking for a house, found a house and celebrate. Now it's like, okay, turn on all the utilities and move in and change David's school. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, okay. After that,
what's next, right?
And breathe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been with you for like the entire process, and I just feel like it was just yesterday you talked about it, and now you're like actually like in the house.
Yeah. So it's exciting. It's exciting, and I will miss, I'm only 30 minutes from my parents, so that's good.
Oh, nice.
So we're still close. So that's good. So my mom and dad were talking too. I have a dog and a cat that also came with us, and they so my dad was like, yep, this is your last night talking to the dog. I'm like, you think it's his last night? Surprise.
Oh, Jen, you'll get to meet them. They come across the camera sometimes too.
Sometimes. Yeah, they do. It's a wild show. But yeah, so thank you, Jen, for coming on. We are so super excited. I have to say, this conversation to me is something that I need to learn about. wills and trusts. And I think when Jen and I had our initial conversation, we were talking about how there is the stereotype when it comes to wills and trusts that you have to be like wealthy in order to have a will, to have a trust. And I know a lot of people think, well, I don't really have anything. And I was actually thinking today, where did I first start hearing about wills and trusts? A will, period. And you know what I really think it was from a soap opera. It was either from a soap opera or from Dallas or Dynasty. One of those. Someone always ended up getting killed. And then it was they investigate or some will or something. So anyway, I'm excited for the conversation because I think it's something that needs to be talked about a lot more. So I know, Izzy, you have opening question because I don't want to miss. Tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're sitting and where you're from, where you live.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you again so much for being so welcoming and wonderful. I love the energy of this space. It's really truly feel good. I love it. And so I am, as Izzy said, I am in Maryland, and I have been doing this work for a while. I'm really passionate about helping people plan their legacies. And I try really hard to spin it that way. Because sometimes when you're talking about wills and trusts, you're also contemplating death and mortality and not being here with people that you love. And it can be really hard. And so I really like to think more about it as a gift that you're offering people that you love. And a way that you can really help to proactively shape your story, and think about what you want your legacy to be, and then manifest it in the world with some documents. And also, there's connection and other things that happen as a part of this process. So often, people have meaningful conversations about what a good life and a good death looks like to them with their loved ones, with their family. It has the power to really kickstart a lot of really meaningful work. And so I love that part of it. And so that's why I do it.
Yeah, I love that.
And I love the way that you call it a legacy. When I read your website, I was like, wow, that makes me feel, so it feels warm to know that I'm going to give something back to my family. Because like Kendra said, I've heard of it in soap operas, trust, and then wills were always a negative thing. Sometimes family members didn't have one. And so the families would fight over who gets what. And so that's how I've viewed it in my head in my younger years. So it's good to come on and to have this conversation. And my first question is, can you explain the difference between a will and a trust?
Absolutely. And just a little lawyer disclaimer. I am just sharing legal information. The laws in every state are different. Often similar in as it relates to these things, but with some key differences. And so this is information that I hope will be really helpful to folks, but it is not legal advice. So if anyone listening or watching wants to get connected to someone in their state who can help them take some steps down this path, I'm happy to help resource, or ye old Google is always there for you as well. But this is legal information and hopefully will be helpful to y'all. So difference between a will and a trust. There are many differences. A will is something that you set up, and it is a way that you express your wishes for the things that you own. And it has to go through a process called the probate process, which basically means that after you die, the person that you have named as your executor or personal representative, they take your will. This is your will. I'm holding it. And they take it to a court and they say, hello, judge, I have a will. Will you please oversee the process to make sure that everything gets done correctly? And the judge will say, well, yes, that's my job. And then the personal representative kind of works and collects all of your property, does an inventory, and then, sends it out the way that it's expressed in the will. A trust is, I like to explain it like a bucket. So you create a bucket and you put property into the bucket. And then you write a set of rules that you tape on the front of the bucket. And then you hand the bucket to whoever you want to be in charge of following those rules, right? That's the trustee. And so then after you die, whoever is holding the bucket, like if you were holding the bucket, the rules would say who it goes to next. And so no one ever drops the bucket, right? So it doesn't need to be cleaned up by a judge. And so you set up all of the rules inside that document, so that the property is handled in a way that you want, is managed by the people that you want to benefit the people that you choose.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And so should one both have a will and a trust, or just a will, or just a trust?
It depends. It depends. I would say most, if not all, people need a will at least. Yeah. And for many people, a trust may also be helpful. But even if you have a trust, it is wise to also have a will, because the tricky thing about trust is that when you create the bucket, you got to then like put your stuff in the bucket. And so that might mean like retitling your house, or kind of changing the way that you operate your bank accounts, or changing the beneficiary designations on certain accounts like insurance or retirement accounts, things like that. And so if you do all of that correctly, then, it's all in the bucket, and that's great. But the reality is that sometimes people miss things. And so oftentimes if you have a trust, you still need to have a will, and it sort of serves as like a scoop. It says like, oops, anything that I didn't put in the trust, like I meant to do that. That was an accident. Scoop it up and then like put it into the bucket for me after I die. And so that it's not plan A, but it is a good backup plan. And so most people with trusts also have something called a pour over will. There are also some things that you can really only do in a will, such as naming long-term guardians for minors. And so parents with young kids definitely need a will for that purpose as well.
Wow. Yeah. That's interesting, because we all have our different meaning. And of course, Google helps a lot, but then Google has so many different, like, which leads to my next question, and then I'll let you go, Kendra, is how do you feel, or should I say, are online wills just as good as creating a will with a lawyer? Are they the same? And will they hold up the same in the courts and so forth?
So again, it depends. There are some templates out there that if your situation is very, very simple, and your family has perfect relationships, and there's no drama ever, and you don't have children, and you don't have people with like special needs in your life, then maybe an online will could like work similarly. But the bottom line is that it's a complicated area of law, and it exists at the intersection of state law and also federal law. And so most people think that their life is like normal and like easy to deal with, like it's average. But the reality is there's no one size fits all family. And so the legal Zoom wills are pretty dubious. Again, these laws change a lot. And so it's really helpful to have the professional advice of someone who can help you really understand the options and the choices that you're making.
Yeah. I think
before I go into my questions, a couple of questions, I think we have a lot of comments coming through. So I want to make sure that we hit those, because we appreciate you guys. And if you guys don't mind liking and sharing this information, sharing this live, because you never know who will need this information. Like we said at the top, it doesn't get talked about enough. So let's spread this knowledge. Tyrone Ricks.
Tyrone Ricks is in the house. He says 10 of Life is tuned in. Hello,
Thank
10
you,
of Life.
Ty. And congratulations.
Thank you for tuning in. He says, good evening, Izzy Meditates, Kendra Moore, and special guest Jen. Thank you, Tyrone, for tuning in.
10 of Life and Feel Good Talk, family forever.
That's right. Thank you. And then we have Charles Brickley says, good evening, ladies. Hello, Charles.
Good evening,
Charles. Good to see you. Wow, 75 degrees. I know she rubs it in.
I do.
I will be in
and
Florida
I'm going to continue rubbing it in too.
Tyrone Rick says, congratulations, Kendra Moore.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate it.
And Charles Brakely says, congratulations on your new home, Kendra.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you. Thank you.
I have my reading glasses on. I'm trying to see here. Charles Brakely says, great info. This is wonderful info. I mean,
yeah, already. I'm like, wow.
Enough. Eddie B is tuned in, says, greetings from Paris and France. Greetings.
Thank you. Hello.
Thanks
Welcome
for
to
tuning
the
in.
podcast.
We have Leticia Letty Langer here. Hello, ladies, she says. Hi,
hey,
Leticia.
Hi.
Good to see you. Eddie B says the top left lady is hot. Oh, my goodness.
All right.
All right. We just had this conversation about being made up and hair.
Right. Hello.
Leticia Letty says Florida. It's Leticia, are you in Florida?
Yeah, she's in Miami.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm really jealous now. Cheryl Robinson says hello from South Carolina. Hi, Cheryl.
Nice to see you.
We also have Kathy Johnson. She says hello and good evening. Hi.
Hi, Kathy. So good. Thank you guys all for tuning in. Make sure this is your opportunity to ask questions. Again, ask questions, try to get as much information so you can make the right decision for your family. So Jen, I was wondering, what can you tell us the importance of having a will? Well, maybe it's not the importance, but what happens to your stuff if you don't have one? Put it that way. If you don't have a will or don't have a trust, what happens?
Right. Okay. So it depends on the state that you live in, but each state has a statute. Everyone's favorite thing to do is read statutes, I know. But each state has a statute called an intestacy statute. And so if you die without a will, the state legislators got together and they said, okay, this is going to be the default plan that we think like most closely matches what, like, again, the average person would want. And so if someone dies without a will, their property is handled by this like default plan that the state has created. So oftentimes it prioritizes family relationships like children and parents and spouses. And so it divides up the property kind of based on those, predetermined shares and kind of passes it that way. Property that you own jointly with someone else, though, again, depending on how you own it, but if you own it in such a way that like you can own it in such a way that when one of you dies, the other one of you gets all of it. And so then that wouldn't go through the intestacy process, that like default plan, because you own it sort of jointly with someone else. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's good. So, I mean, because I always thought, I knew of that kind of relationship. And then I was thinking, well, like you said, if there was some tension or, something like that, I didn't know if things went into like an abyss, if they truly divided it all up or it just like, because sometimes you see like unclaimed property that you see in papers and newspapers and stuff, like you have unclaimed property. So I always thought like, ooh, somebody didn't write down a will or
Yeah. Well, it explains these intestacy statutes explain kind of how you can get to those really distant relatives. And so that does sometimes happen, right? Like the courts can't find these people. And so then it does sometimes go into an abyss. And it can be hard to handle. The probate process also sometimes takes a very long time, and so that also can complicate things too. But again, it depends on your state. Some states are like really on top of it, and other states are like not so on top.
Yeah, that was like one of my questions because you always hear like, oh my gosh, if you don't do it this way, you're gonna lose everything.
Yeah, the government's gonna get it, and you're like, oh, I don't want the government to get it, right? So
yeah.
And then one of my other questions, as we think about like, does this work similar to health insurance? Like you have your beneficiary, your primary, your secondary. Does that work similarly?
So that so when you're doing this work, it's important to think about all of those things, right? Your retirement accounts, your health insurance, your life insurance, kind of all of the different like parts of your financial life, as well as your relationships, as well as like your physical stuff. And so you go through the process of creating a pretty comprehensive checklist. And then you, depending on the type of plan that you use, you might need to update those policies and shift who the beneficiary would be. Again, so it all works together. The goal is to like comprehensive plan.
Wow.
And sometimes when you're looking at it all together and thinking about, if you have, a couple of kids and you want to create a trust for them to make sure that their assets are managed properly and then doled out to them at like, not at 18, maybe, I don't know. Yeah. Maybe your 18-year-olds are more responsible than the 18-year-olds. I know. But I don't want a lot of 18-year-olds walking around with like, 6 figures of money that they could just like handle however they wanted. And so oftentimes people use trusts to get people kind of through their 20s, and then they'll distribute some things, over time, make sure that they're able to use it for education, for down payment on a house, other things that they value. And before they give it to them later. But when you're thinking about that, sometimes people realize that they want to up their life insurance, or they want to kind of increase the assets that could pour into the trust later. And so that's another way that kind of thinking about all of this really comprehensively can be really helpful for families.
Yeah.
No, because I was also. Go ahead, Izzy.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say
real quick, because this is going to lead into another conversation. So if you have a quick question, but just so I can put it out there and I don't forget, I do want to talk about the whole myth and our whole thinking around wills and trusts, and thinking that you have to have a lot of money, you have to have, you have to be a homeowner, you have to have all this stuff, or, so I just want to kind of talk about that. But go ahead, Izzy, if you had a question.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I really didn't think about a will until COVID came along, and until my son turned 18. Something clicked. I was like in the middle of nowhere driving, and I was like, oh, he's 18. If I pass away or my husband pass away, then he's going to be in charge of everything. This is super, like you really have to, think about these things to put them in place. But before COVID, I don't know. I just thought that, I had plenty of time. I wasn't really worried about it. But now I was like, okay, now I need to bump up the insurance. Now I need to bump up, getting the will taken care of, because I don't know. It's that uncertainty. Yeah.
So let's talk about that, Jen. So can you talk about, just that mindset and just try to get people to see that you don't have to have a whole lot of money, or, probably what you have is worth establishing some kind of will and or trust.
Yeah. So there are, again, so we talked about your physical stuff, and then like your financial life, and then also your relationships. And so for folks who don't have, who may not have like a giant bank account, or like, a second home in Florida, or somewhere else warm.
No shade.
Of course, it's 75, right? Like I owe something. I don't know.
I know, right? I know.
The preserving of family relationships, I think, is always a motivator for folks. And so in a will, you get to name who you want to be in charge of the process of kind of handling the things that you do have after you die. And that in itself can be a gift to families, because even though folks may get along, once you're not here anymore, like there may be contention, there may be drama that could have been avoided if you had gone ahead and said, like, I want so-and-so is my first choice, and then like so-and-so is my second choice. And then kind of taken those decisions out of their hands. Because when you make those decisions, it helps them like accept it, and then they can work together more cooperatively because they know that they're following your wishes. And so that's one big piece. The other one, again, is like minor children, or people who have like, I don't know, just because something may not have a lot of like monetary value doesn't mean it doesn't have value, right? Like there's a lot of ways that things are meaningful to us and to our loved ones. And so sometimes if you just assume that like a court's going to handle it properly and like everything will just get divided up and people will just do it fairly, they may do that. But also there may be people who, because you didn't tell them that you wanted them to have this like set of special dishes that they loved, or that like you wanted them to have your, antique camera, or like your, I don't know, I'm sitting in my basement looking at all my kids' toys, which are like not heirlooms, so not good example. But like your Calico Kitty treehouse, right? Like there may be people who want that, who are afraid to speak up kind of in the fray. And so if you have those things that are going to be meaningful to someone else, even if it's, something that was not a big investment for you or would be, purchasable outside of your estate, it can be a really like beautiful thing to say, like, I want so-and-so to have like first dibs on this category of thing, or of this category of thing, or, my grandmother's cookbook, right? Like who gets grandma's cookbook? That's like a thing. And so thinking through that stuff and taking the time to give your family the gift of order in what is like maybe a traumatic or difficult time, definitely has a lot of value in itself.
Yeah. Wow. I'd never thought about that before, but that is so true. Like all the sentimental things.
Yeah.
So I gotta talk to my mom to put me down for jewelry. Can you put me down for jewelry, please? No, but that's beautiful. And again, it goes back to what you were saying earlier as you were talking. I was like, yeah, that goes back to that, thinking about this whole process, like you said, using that word legacy. Yeah. Right? Because you have the sentimental thing that you're giving to someone and now they have it, and then maybe they pass that on to someone else. But even just that first pass, your legacy is established. They already, see whatever you gave them, use whatever they gave them. So that's really beautiful. I never thought about that. So that's nice. I got to think about that some more.
So I was wondering, and this came across when I was thinking of questions. If you were on your sickbed and you have not gotten a will completed, are you able to write something right then and there? And can that stand in court? Can a video recording of yourself, can that be a will as well?
So that's an excellent question. And this is one of those places where state laws vary a lot.
Yeah.
And so I know in Maryland, there are only very, very, very limited circumstances when you can handwrite a will and sign it. It's one of the examples I remember from the statute is service members overseas, right? Like they're allowed to write a will and sign it, and like it can count. But then even like after they are back for a certain amount of time, it becomes invalid because like there's a very strong preference for wills that are executed according to the formalities that go with this process, right? Because there's so much room for fraud and for mistakes, that's why these formalities exist. Wow. So, in most states, you have to sign it in front of witnesses. You have to have it notarized. And this is because sometimes the courts need to go talk to these witnesses and talk to the notary, and make sure that, if there's a challenge, that the person knew what they were doing, that they were competent at the time, right? So, but it does depend. In other states, I know the holographic wills, that's what they call them when you write it out and then sign it. Yeah. Are valid in a broader capacity than in Maryland. So that's definitely a state by state.
Wow. Well, I always wondered, and that, like she was talking about the soaps. I was wondering like what happens. I mean, if you don't have one, and what if you can't afford one? What's the best?
Yeah, and are they like really as expensive as what we might think? Are there varying degrees of legal documentation you can get?
Yeah, so like it varies a lot, and there are sometimes there are clinics that you can find, or like community groups that do like education around this stuff. Churches or community centers, libraries sometimes will have like educational spaces, and that's a great place where you can go and maybe meet with an attorney in a group, and so the attorney is offering this information for free and can really give you like a leg up, so that if you do decide to work with that lawyer, like it takes a lot less time and you can really like go lickety split. And so it really does vary. The other part of this is that there are lots of other pieces that often go along with, again, that comprehensive plan. And so that's another thing that folks may not necessarily know to think about ahead of time. And so when you meet with a lawyer, you may think that you just want a will, but then you learn that there may be some other tools out there that might help you as well, such as like an advance directive for healthcare, or a power of attorney for your finances, which basically means someone who can pay your mortgage if you are in an accident and are still alive but not able to manage your finances, right? And so there are a lot of other parts of this that attorneys can help provide information about, and often do in like community spaces. So there's not a high barrier to entry to that kind of information.
Wow, that is awesome. Yeah. So I need to look at that myself. I do want to go back to some comments.
Yeah.
That we have that's popped up since the last set. I'll give it a second.
There we go. Leticia says yes, and Kendra, you're
good. From Miami when you ask.
Kathy Johnson says hello, good evening. Hi, Kathy. Thank you for tuning in. She says, Jax, Florida, my first time tuning in. Oh my goodness, all these Florida people.
What Floridians in the house. You know how we do.
Good to see you. Cheryl Robinson says mom is listening also.
Aww,
very nice. That is very nice. Yeah. Charles Blakely says, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Yes, we appreciate you tuning in. He also says, go to our YouTube page and subscribe at Feel Good FGT Mind, Body, Soul, and Business. If you do that, you're able to see all the replays. So that's an awesome way to catch if you're not able to watch it.
Yeah.
Let's see, it's the Sunny Estate.
Yeah.
Please like and share. Yes, because you never know, like we don't talk about these things very, very often. Honestly, like I said, I really did not get into talking about this until COVID came along, and it was like, okay, we need to really do something. So it's very nice to be educated and know the difference between a will and a trust, and know the difference, if it's okay if you sign something really quick, how it's going to work out. Yeah.
And I think so too. Again, we never know what other people are going through. So whenever you can share information, then, you can really help someone, and you may not have any idea that you're helping them. But especially now with all the stuff going on, you don't know what's happening in people's families. So this is definitely an important conversation. So I have a question for the entrepreneurs out there. Is there do you tie your personal will and trust with your business? Like, how does that intermingle, or is it totally separate process for stuff?
So again, it depends. It's like the worst lawyer answer ever, but it's so true. There are so many ways, right, that people organize their business life, right? So maybe you have a single member LLC, in which case that would be counted as a probate asset. So that's one of the things that falls down to the floor when you die if you haven't created a bucket for it, or created some other mechanism to avoid probate. And so, a single member LLC, that is absolutely something that you can incorporate into the plan that exists with your family, depending on the dynamics involved. If you are in a partnership or have an LLC with multiple interests, right, that's something that, again, you may deal with kind of on your own, but probably the operating agreement of that business will also provide for how to handle a membership interest if someone dies, right? So sometimes that's where you end up with buy-sell agreements, and people take out life insurance. It can be complicated and interesting, the way that these things are handled. But if you have a sole proprietorship, which is just kind of, you decide one day you're going to start a business, and then you start a business and you don't kind of go through the process of filing anything. That's the default way that people are in business. And so that absolutely should be part of your estate plan. because you want to cover the property that you have, the investments that you've made, and make a plan for whether this is going to be like a family business that other people will take on, who you want to be in charge of kind of winding up your business if your business is something that can't really function without you. And so oftentimes that will fall to family members or to others that you're close to. And so that's absolutely one of the important like property interests that we talk about when we're going through this process.
That's awesome. I was thinking about Izzy, I was thinking about Tyrone from 10 of Life, you know, too, as you were talking, because, you know, you have these, everyone loves their business, but then, and we all have an impact on the world. But I think especially if you're like doing these community-based businesses, if something happens to you and you're like feeling this big need in the community and you know, all of a sudden all those resources stop, then, you know, a lot of people are just so directly impacted. So yeah. So that's really great to know.
That's a great question. I would have never thought. I didn't listen. I worked for the county, for the government for so many years, and the piles of paperwork and all the little things that we had to fill out in detail, I would definitely come to you. There's no way I would be able to do it online. It would take me way too long to figure it out. And I would have so many questions. So I think the best route is to come to an attorney like you and discuss your options, because there's so many different avenues that you can go. And you just can't do that online. I just feel the anxiety building up thinking about filling out forms.
That, and then don't rely on your friends, right? You know, because unfortunately, of course, they love you and they have their own experience, but your experience is different. You know what I mean? Like your personal and your preference, and, you know, and don't just take the easy way out just because. Like really take the time to talk to people, talk to the right person, attorney, lawyer, someone like Jen, who can really help you be thoughtful about. And the thing I love, Jen, about this whole conversation is that you're being very comprehensive. You know, I love the aspect of the relationships and then your material things and your financial things. You know, it's like a triangle, and I love that. Shoot, I had another question, and then I was talking, and I completely. Oh, what about leaving stuff to organizations? Because you always hear like the cat lady died, and she left $2 million to like the cat orphanage or something. But yeah. So what about leaving things to organizations? Is that a whole different process, or that can be included with the will?
Yeah, so that for a lot of people that is included in the planning, whatever planning vehicle you're using.
Okay.
And you can say, you know, I want either X number of dollars or X percentage of my estate to benefit, you know, some charity, a school, church, whatever you want. And so some people do it that way. Other folks may end up with high value assets that have a low cost basis. So they're assets that have appreciated a great deal over time. And so they would owe a lot of taxes of some kind, income tax or capital gains tax, depending, on them. And so they may choose those assets for things that they want to send to charity because it ultimately like saves them in taxes. And so if they have like charitable intentions anyway, they may choose, you know, they may make a choice that like a certain asset can fulfill that charitable intent, which then benefits their like whole estate because they have to pay less in taxes or, you know, whatever it is.
That's smart. That might be why, because sometimes I hear that and I'm like, really? Like you left like $10 million to like, you know, whatever, which, you know, I understand people, you know, may love whatever cat or something. And I have a cat, so I'm not cat bashing, but I'm just saying.
You know, you can, depending on the state, you can set up pet trusts. That's like, that's a thing.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So they take care of your pet the right way.
So then you would assign someone to take care of your pet and assign, if you had the money to fund them to help take care of the pet.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
With like stipulations, right? You could have stipulations like you have to walk him 4 times a day, or you have to make sure he sees the specific vet in order to get
right. Yeah. I mean,
right.
some people they get real detailed. I mean, ultimately, you want to choose someone that you would trust to hopefully like love the cat as you love the cat, and so you wouldn't need to like specify all that. But
I'm laughing at Kendra right now.
So
tell us about your love for your cat, Kendra. Come on.
Yeah, I love them. Keep it moving.
But that's also, I mean, depending on the person and the assets that they have, you can also there's some cool vehicles out there. Charitable remainder trusts are one of them, which is a really cool thing in that you can say, make a gift of like $50,000 to a charity and put it in a trust, and it can pay out income to a designated beneficiary. So you can say like income to my grandchild for 20 years, and then like whatever's left at the end, the charity actually gets. And so, but you get
that's neat.
But you get a tax break for like a big chunk of that when you create it. And so sometimes that can be like that would be like a standalone document. And can be useful sometimes depending on the situation.
Oh wow! Now, does a will or a trust expire? I saw a couple that literally they were in their 20s and they had decided to get their own tombstone engraved and everything paid for, right? Like that day, paid for it. So for the future, yeah. So if you're in your 20s and you create a will, does it expire past like?
No, so it does not expire. What may happen to you is that the laws may change. A lot of laws may change. And so it may, whatever you specify in your will is what would happen. But there may be adverse consequences that you hadn't been able to consider because the laws were different at the time. But no, they don't expire.
Do you encourage young people to get wills once they turn over 18 or whatever age it may be?
Yeah. So like when I work with young people, 18 to 22 or college age folks, whether they're in college or not, I often prioritize some of the other documents. So say, for example, an advanced healthcare directive where you can name someone or a succession of people who can make medical decisions for you if you're not able to make them for yourself. Because that is, once you're 18, that's not your parents anymore, right? Like you may want to be, that your wishes. But in order for if you're, in an emergency situation, in order for your parents to make those designations, they may need to go to court to get an emergency order, and it could, can create a whole thing. So thinking through those questions, I think, is really helpful for young adults anyway. And then also you can, create these documents to ensure that their wishes would be carried out. A living will is also something I like to talk about with young adults, which is again, different in different states, what they call it. But in some states, it's a separate document, and it's a document that outlines end of life wishes. And so, if you're in a state where you are unlikely to recover knowledge of who you are or who you were with, then, what do you want to happen, right? Do you want machines to keep you alive for a certain amount of time? Do you not want machines? Like, how do you want to think through that? And so that is oftentimes young adults really appreciate that conversation because it's a very adult conversation, and they have thoughts about it, right? Like, I don't know, not all of them do, but I've been impressed by the nuance and the thought that has gone into this for some of the young adults that I've talked to.
And that's awesome for young people to even think, you know what I mean? Because most of them, we don't think about that until we're in our 40s or 50s.
Yeah. So it's good. I mean, sometimes it inspires them. It kickstarts conversations with their parents as well, which is really healthy, I think. And so it can, again, be a good place for families to kind of come together around these tricky topics.
Yeah. Wow. Love that.
So let's hit a commercial break.
Yes.
And we can come back and keep going with this conversation.
Yes. Of course I have more questions.
Izzy, you're trying to get your son's music machine. You're like, it's the young kids. Fancy Will, his like beats, all his beat equipment.
I know, right? Yeah, because you don't realize that, but he's 18 now, so if I call his doctor, I can't talk to them.
As a matter of fact, I never thought about that.
I'm paying for his college, but I cannot talk to the teachers or the financial aid office about it. He has to let them know, or we have to sign paperwork. I'm like, what is this? I'm paying the money.
I never thought about that. So yeah, that's eye-opening. So I have to. Wow.
Right, the commercial.
All right, so we're going to commercial, and we'll see you guys on the other side.
Our commercial sponsor tonight, and I remember the name, is the A Game. Yes. How could I forget that? But I remember this week, it's the A Game, and it is a male supplement. And so if you are interested, you can always reach out to Mr. Charles Brakely. He has 2 or 3 available, and I know he's thinking like she is... Well, we'll tell you about the joke.
Yeah. But we joke about him having 2 or 3 samples left, but he is literally always like, those things fly. So we joke about it, but it's a real thing. Like, we're not making it up. Like, so Jen, question: what should people look for when they are looking for someone like you? Like, how do you start the conversation? Yeah. I know, of course, some of it is like a comfort level with the person, but talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I guess in some ways it depends on like what you're looking for, and what your goals are. So that should be like part of one of the very first conversations that you have with an attorney. And if it's not, then like, oh no, red flag, because that means that the attorney is making a lot of assumptions about what is best for you and what you want. And so, someone who is going to like really ask you a lot about what you want, not just like what you have. And so that's something that it's important to me. There are different ways that people practice this work. And so if it's important to you, that's definitely something you should look for, because not everyone necessarily approaches it that way. It's helpful also to find out early on whether they help with their pricing structure is, right? Some people do a flat fee. Some people do an hourly rate. And so it's not just sort of one way all throughout the estate planning world. And so that's helpful. If you are in like a specific stage of life, it can be helpful to look on their website to see if they have any content that shows that they're particularly proficient in working with people in your situation, right? A lot of folks do this work when they've got younger kids, or when they're like empty nesters. And so, but there's never a wrong time to do it. And so you may find people, right? I work with a lot of young families. I have young kids. These are my friends and people I'm in, social groups with or otherwise. And so there's that's something to look for too, because again, there's different nuances that can come up. And there are also some like there can be some challenging moments of impasse. Talking about who people want as guardians for children can be one of those. And so if you're with an attorney who doesn't necessarily specialize in working with young families, they may not really have a lot of resources to offer you. They may just sort of say, well, like make a decision, right? Like decide now and let me know so that I can, put it in. You can change it later, right? As opposed to like really kind of engaging you on the question and helping you like make sure that your decision is really grounded in your values, and that you're really comfortable with it. So So if that's something that's important to you, that's definitely a vibe that you will get from someone's website and from an initial conversation with them.
Yeah. That is so. I love, because Jen, in our initial conversation, one thing you had said is like, and I can't remember if it was in our conversation or website, but you kind of like said that you take a values-based approach. And I like that because, like you're saying, it's not just about, okay, what do you have? You know what I mean? It's like, what do you value, and how do you, again, going back to that whole common theme of legacy, and how do you want your legacy to be represented amongst the people that you know, friends, family, organizations, etc. So I think that's great. But I do have a question. I was like, why do I have this? So anyway, it was a note that I wrote and I couldn't read my handwriting. But then as you were talking, it clicked. And that is godparent, right? So a lot of people will have kids and then they'll be like, hey, would you be their godmother, their godfather? And you're like, yeah. Well, if something happens to the parent, giving that person a godparent title without the paperwork behind it of like, maybe like saying that this is the will or a trust or something. Can you talk a little bit about, just to kind of underscore the fact that just because you are labeled godparent doesn't necessarily mean that you have, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yes, right. Yes, you are correct. That is, godparents are lovely, beautiful, wonderful things, but are not a legal relationship. And so there is that doesn't, I mean, if the person has a longstanding relationship with the child, and this were to come before a court, then a court maybe would say, oh, so-and-so is named godparent and also has a, longstanding relationship with the child, and also, all of these other things. If it comes down to a court to decide, they may well, choose a godparent, just by virtue of the relationship that they have. But it would not, there's no like default built in to that title. And so another thing that a lot of folks don't necessarily think about as it relates to guardianship of kiddos is that they maybe are going to think about or talk about long-term guardians. And so again, those are the people that you name in a will. And should probably be like a list of people in a list of succession, so that if like the first person isn't available, right, like it doesn't just like get tossed into the air, right? You're able to say what you would prefer. But also in like a short-term emergency situation, in most states, there are kind of separate forms that you can fill out, or an attorney would work with you to complete, to nominate an emergency guardian, or in Maryland it's called a standby guardian. And these would be people who would be like very local to you, who, like, say in the example of like a spouse is traveling overseas and like, oh, there's a pandemic and they can't get home. And the parent who's here is in a car accident and is unconscious, right? Like in that situation, it's possible that the child would have to spend some time in foster care before a judge would release them to a family member or a close friend, right? And so, like obviously that's no one's first choice, right? But courts, the police, and the state take the safety of children super seriously, and so if there's not this paperwork in place, and there's any sort of doubt about who has the legal authority to parent that child, to make healthcare and educational decisions for that child, especially, then that is a possibility. And so putting these documents in place is also a very important part of comprehensive planning. And then, having these conversations, maybe it's maybe your relatives that you would want to be long-term guardians are like across the country. And so, having conversation with local friends and neighbors, family members, who would be able to step in on a short-term basis is also important.
I was just about to ask that question. I was going to say, well, where does the child go? And you just said it. And I was like,
Well, it's funny. I think two takeaways from me are like, okay, again, like you said, a godparent is not a legal, relationship. Legal relationship. So make sure if you if you're claiming someone or having someone be a godparent, that you follow up with the right paperwork. That way it's taken seriously in the courts if something happened. But then I was also just thinking through all of the cases that I heard, especially when COVID was really bad, about parents, like that situation with both parents passing away. That happened a lot within the last 2 years, 2.5 years now, it feels like. So yeah. So that's deep.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because the previous question, and I think that it's important because with social media and everything now, everyone is an expert. You can be an expert all day, but you want to make sure someone is actually certified, qualified. You know what I mean? Because there are a lot of people that are giving advice on laws, advice on wills, but they're not really lawyers, or they're not really in their field of practice to really be careful and to do your research and know that that person is legit. Because I'm just noticing now, like, people are online giving advice as if they were therapists, and they're not.
Right? Yeah, and then
no
they're just trying to
disclaimer.
make some change.
Right.
What type of lawyer should they? So I'm thinking again about the person listening to the podcast, and then they want to, like, okay, I need to really find somebody to help me with this. Is it any attorney? Is it a specialized attorney? Like, how do you Google this? And if you're in Maryland, you can contact Jen, because she is. So Jen is your one from Maryland, but for us outside of Maryland, what do you search on?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are a couple of like national databases. You can go to, like, I think it's estate planner or estateplan.com, and you can search. They have a directory of folks that you can use. And so it's not the people who do wills and trusts often specialize in it. So there might be some attorneys that sometimes it'll be paired with like a business attorney. So you might have someone who does like business entities and wills and trusts, estate planning. And that would be a combination that makes a lot of sense. Or maybe family law and estate planning makes a lot of sense. But if you have someone who does like commercial litigation and personal injury and criminal defense and estate, like, I'm not sure that's your person.
That's a lot.
Again, like if it's someone you know and you trust, then that's one thing. But there's a lot to stay up to date on. I feel like there's just updates all the time. Congress changes laws all the time that relate to this.
Right.
And so it's important to stay on top of, and takes time. So if people have a lot of other practice areas, it means they may not be able to dedicate the amount of time that's necessary to really be an expert.
Yeah. And can I ask one more question? And then Jen, Izzy, because you guys look like twins. Izzy.
Are you saying, I think there's some discrimination going on because we're in the cold and she's in the heat. That's what's going on.
The cold twins. But what made you interested in this, and how did you get started? Because it's just so interesting. So how did you get interested in doing this?
Yeah. So the law, if any other lawyers are listening to this, hopefully they will not be angry at me, but the law is sometimes a really clunky tool for solving problems. Oftentimes anyone who's ever been through a lawsuit or have had to use the court system in either a criminal or civil capacity, it's a rough process. And the intentions are often very good of the laws that exist. But it's messy, and it doesn't really solve problems. I mean, it shifts money around maybe, but it doesn't solve problems. And so I really like this area of law because it allows you to stop problems from happening. You can get in and hopefully create something that both gives someone a lot of peace of mind, and also puts them and their family in a good position for the future. So I really like that. I also really I like humans, and I like human stories. And so helping, I have a background in theology and in ministry work as well. And so I really love kind of sitting with people as they talk about what is meaningful to them, what they want to sort of survive them in the world after they're no longer here. And I'm comfortable having those tough conversations around life and death and those things. So so this is a practice area that makes a lot of sense for that like weird combination of skill sets that I've combined over the years. And so it's a great way to kind of live into all of that.
Yeah, I can imagine it takes a heart and patience.
Yes.
So, heart, patience, and then, like you said, knowing how to communicate with people in such a way where you're helping them think deep. You're trying not to be, you're not trying not to be, but you're not being like, okay, what is it that you want? I'm very analytical. So I would be like, they would be going through a story and I'd be like, okay, so at the end of the day, what is it?
What are you trying to say?
Yeah. But, it's a gift. And I mean that sincerely. It is a gift to be able to have these types of conversations and have that, because it's almost like you're connecting with these people at like such a heart. It's not a head thing, it's a heart thing. And that's the vibe that I get from you. So Yvette, I met you too late. I met you too late before my move. But go ahead, Izzy.
Yeah, I have one more question. Well, I have several, but I want to ask this. And the question is, I know that you help with will and trust and estate planning. Can someone come to you after the fact? Like if their family member does not have a will, they don't have an estate, and their thing is chaotic, can they come to you and ask you for help as well?
Yes, although I might, depending on the situation, I might refer them to someone else. But there are sometimes attorneys that specialize in both planning and then administration or probate. I focus mostly on the planning part, but there are often people, I mentioned at the very beginning, this court supervised process of, what happens when you have a will, or if you don't, that process often requires people to seek professional advice. And so there are attorneys who step in, who help people clean up those messy moments, or just sort of work through all of the, there's a lot of tasks involved. And so there are a lot of tasks involved with a trust as well, depending. But that is a little more relaxed because you don't have it's not a court involved process, right? It's just something that you just have to follow all the rules in the trust and like as it relates to the taxes and stuff to get all of that done. And so absolutely, depending on the situation, I would be happy to help. I might have frozen. There I am. But yes, so there would be, you would be looking for a probate attorney or an estate administration attorney at that point.
Wow.
That's a great question, Izzy. I didn't think about that.
I've learned so much. I'm just like
I know. Well, let's get to a few last minutes. We're at the end of our time, unfortunately, because this has been very cool.
I know. I have so many more questions. I'm just like Charles Brakely says people are scared to talk about this because reality sets in that we are only here temporarily. Absolutely. Yeah. No one wants to talk about it at all, until it's, I was going to say hits the fan. And then we're like, oh, we got to plan these things and we leave our family behind and they're all fighting. Leticia says, thank you, ladies. Oh, thank you for tuning in.
Thank you, ladies.
William Bird says, a little late. Oh, no worries. A lot late, but I made it. Good evening, ladies.
Good evening, William.
Cheryl Robinson says, this is very informative. Thank you, Jen. I love the humor. Also, laughter is good medicine. It's so needed. It is. We kind of all hit it off from like the start. So
yes. And it's important to find someone that you feel comfortable with and can connect with, and especially for those tough conversations. So Jen, how can people who are in Maryland, or like you said, even if they just want to maybe think you just for general, like who should I Google or how should I Google something? Can you tell us your contact information?
Yeah, so you can email me at jen@marylandlegacylaw.com. And you can find me on, that's my website as well, Maryland Legacy Law. I do offer like some values planning conversations that are there. It's sort of more like this. It's information. It's not legal advice. And so for folks who want to get their ducks in a row, or who are like feeling really stuck on some of those harder moments, I have some exercises and some resources that I walk through with folks. And so that's out there as well if anyone would find that helpful.
Yeah, I did see on your website you had that quiz. I forgot what it's called, but it was like if you had kids.
It's about 5-question kids, 5-question quiz about whether you've taken the steps that would be recommended to make sure your kids are protected if something were to happen to you. So that can be, again, it varies by state, but it's a fairly, it translates pretty well no matter where you are. So you can do that as well. It's on the homepage.
So let me ask you, because I know you just said that. So if someone could come to you for advice, even though they're in a different state, and talk to you on that as far as like just general advice, but you would refer them to someone else if they were in a different state, like to a different lawyer or a different. Nice.
Yeah. So if someone really wants to do, again, that values-based coaching work, that I enjoy, and really wants to do some of that before they get connected to maybe a more like traditional attorney in their state, then I'm happy to do that. I have a workbook to share some exercises that can help people like really be grounded in that before they engage in that work, wherever that work would be.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we put your contact information on the page so that way people can have easy access to you. We do have one. We have a couple of more, or maybe one more comment.
William Bird says, I've had some interactions with wills and trust attorneys when I was executive, sorry. I got my reading glasses on.
I was like, executive.
I'm like, what? Counselor and sold pre-need cemetery property. Oh, wow.
Ooh,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. My glasses, I've switched from like, if I take them off, all I can see is hair. And when I put them on, they make my eyes big, but then I got to go, you guys don't want me to look like that, because that's
it's all good. Jen, you started to say something. Was it about?
No, just that like there are, oftentimes folks will wrap in thinking about what kind of like memorial or funeral they would like, and also whether they want to be buried or cremated or purchase some of those pre-need services that the commenter had mentioned. So that's not necessarily it's kind of like a legal adjacent piece, but it makes sense to like think about it again comprehensively as part of the process.
So are you DMV or just Maryland?
I'm only licensed in Maryland, but I live like 12 feet from the DC line. So I'm
because we clump everything together here, so that's why I wanted to make sure.
No,
if you're in Virginia, it's DMV, so
Right. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Jen, thank you so much for this great conversation. We really appreciate having you on. You guys know that we are located everywhere. Yes. Do you want me to take this piece?
Yes. So
all right.
For sure, we'll have Jen's information in the comments. So if you need to contact her with her website and her email address, of course. And then if you want to connect with us, we're on LinkedIn at Feel Good Talk, Facebook, Feel Good Talk, YouTube at FGT Mind, Body, Soul, and Business, and Instagram at feel.goodtalk. And you can email us at feelgoodtalk113@gmail.com. And we also have a website, www.feelgoodtalk.net. We have merchandise on there as well. If you're interested, be sure to send us a message. We'll get your merch out, and to take a picture and post it on our page. We also have openings for ads if you like to sponsor or be a sponsor on our podcast. And we also have openings for interviews. Probably won't be on our show for like the next 2 months or so, but we can get you in there.
We'll get you in. Yeah, for sure. And especially, if it's yourself or someone that you think would have valuable information, whether it's a business or a specialty expertise, then feel free to reach out to us. Let us know. We're happy to make contact, or you can have them tag us, and then we'll reach out to them. So, but thank you guys so much for joining. And Jen, we love having you on. We always say, once you're on Feel Good Talk, you're part of the Feel Good Talk family.
Always, yes.
So if ever you want to, platforms to come on and, give us some updated information, or, just let us know, and we would be more than happy to have you back.
Yes.
Thank you. This was so fun. I feel like we could just keep talking and hanging out all
day.
Oh
yeah.
That's right.
I know.
For sure. We could go on for hours.
We could.
Now let's see if you're as good as Kendra with making a heart, because we always make a heart.
We always end doing a heart.
I'm getting better.
Yes. Izzy has been doing it for over a year now. She's still struggling, but it's all right. We love you guys. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in.